during that period of time, I got into the executive MBA program. And so I was in business school and I bought my first business, which was a catering truck, while I was trying to get into dental school.
Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest is Dr. Mark Cost. Wow. Okay. Well, I guess it's a good thing that we're not live. So that's why that's why we recorded this, so we can afford to do it.
Yeah, cool.
Mark Costas. All right. Take two. Let me mark this so my editor knows where we're at. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest is Dr. Mark Costas. He is the CEO of Dental Success Network and Dental Success Institute. He's a multiple practice owner, author of 4 books, and host of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. So, Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Austin. I love chatting with you about current events, economic events, and real estate, et cetera. It's been fun the last couple of times we've done this. So thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for everybody listening, this is our second time doing an interview with Mark. And so if you want to get full into his backstory, there's a lot of great nuggets in there. It was in 2020 that we did or early 2021 that we did the first recording. But yeah, so I still would like to go over a little bit, just like, high level, 1,000-foot overview, like what were you like, what was it like growing up as a kid, and how did that lead you into dental? How did that lead you into being, author, owner of multiple practices, CEO of the Success Network? Like, what was that path like, real quick?
Yeah, sure. Son of immigrants. My dad and mom came here in the late 60s with like typical immigrant story. They had a suitcase and $150 and started a brand new life. My dad was, a holder of 3 different degrees: electrical engineering, bachelor's, mechanical engineering, and also an MBA. And he was a college professor in the Philippines. That's actually how they met. My mom was one of his students. So great life. He was the supporter of most of his brothers and sisters. He put 2 of his sisters through dental school and another brother through undergrad. So he was kind of the anchor of the family there. They had a huge family in the Philippines, as did my mom. Very, very well established. And they literally just left it all for the promise of a better life in the United States. And they started in Chicago, Illinois in the late 60s. When they were allowing people from other countries to come over that had advanced degrees, like engineers and architects and physicians and attorneys. Those types of people were allowed to come over really, really easily, with the immigration standards being loosened for those types of people with that were smart, that were going to help build the infrastructure of the United States back then.
Which we should do again. That should be... Like, we should be bringing all those people in. Like, we're going to talk about labor later with the labor shortage. But
yes.
Anyways, that's beside the point right now.
Yeah. So, it was called third preference, and he took advantage of that. I was the first first generation American in my family. So I was born in New York, then we moved to Colorado, then Arizona, then Southern California, all with his employer, which was IBM. But although he was kind of a corporate guy working his way up the corporate ladder, he and my mom and most of our relatives were very, very entrepreneurial. So I always had, the stories at the dinner table of all these entrepreneurs in my family. I always knew that I wanted to own my own thing. I wanted to be the founder of something. I didn't want to follow his path and be kind of the cog in a wheel. Although he made a great, great living, I just couldn't see living to the beat of somebody else's drum. So I knew always that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know it was going to be dentistry, but when I was 16 years old, I was playing in a baseball game, my first varsity baseball game, and I collided with the left field fence, broke my jaw, lost most of my upper front teeth, and that sent me on a journey of, rehabilitating my face and my teeth. And I got really interested in dentistry because I really looked up to the people that put my face back together. So from that point on, I ended up playing a little bit of college sports. I was a college football player for a year. I had a pretty serious back injury. So that was the point at which I pivoted and got into, really focusing on my grades and refocusing on this ultimate goal of becoming a dentist. So it took me 3 years and 21 attempts to get into dental school because I had the typical
21 attempts,
21 tries.
Wow.
And I got in one school. So I have 20 rejection letters and 1 acceptance.
Wow.
Yeah. And 3 years.
There's a huge lesson right there on rejection.
Yeah, and during that time though, that was the best blessing of my life. I was in San Diego, which is a hard place to kind of be lost, right? I mean, what a great place. I lived on the beach, and I didn't really know what to do with my life, but it was fun to surf every day, and I know that you would have appreciated that a lot.
Oh, I love surfing. Yeah.
Yep. So I did that, and during that period of time, I got into the executive MBA program, and so I was in business school, and I bought my first business, which was a catering truck. While I was trying to get into dental school. So I kind of cut my teeth on entrepreneurship and got a really solid business background while I was trying to get into dental school, but kind of kept that dream, the embers burning of that dream. And then when I graduated from dental school, I started with an associateship position, which means I was working for somebody. But then after my first year, I started buying dental practices. Ended up with 16 at one point, with well over 100 employees. And made just about every mistake you could possibly make in dental practice ownership and leadership and all of that stuff. I was a terrible boss, stressed all the time before I learned how to delegate correctly and systemize correctly. And then, after about 10 years, I realized that I had a very specific skill set, and that was born in the fact that I made just about every mistake you can make. And I had some level of success as well. So blend those two things together, and I had a unique skill set and a unique knowledge base. So I started consulting, and that has become kind of my main bread and butter. I still own dental practices, but I also consult and speak more than anything else. I have a podcast that has led to a great lead generator for my other businesses as well.
So when you had 16 practices and 100 employees, were you considered a DSO at that stage?
I was not a DSO. I was individual LLCs. But all a DSO really is in the state of Arizona, it's much easier to own multiple practices without a DSO because you don't have to be a practicing dentist to own a dental practice in the state of Arizona. But in other states, in order to be a non-dentist and own even a part of a dental practice, you have to have a dental license or you have to have a DSO. So in my case, I just had several different LLCs. I could have put a big kind of bow around it and became a DSO. I just never did.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So, yeah, it's cool. So there's no better way to learn than hands-on because you can read books and learn, try and learn as much as you can through college and through webinars and everything. But there's no real substitute for the real thing because you never arrive. You never learn everything. It's an impossibility because if you do, then somebody else is going to come learn it and they're going to eat your lunch. So it's just a constant learning experience. And it's the difference, between having an open mind and a closed mindset, really.
I totally agree. I mean, if I was to compare, the MBA classes versus owning a single catering truck, what was more valuable as far as my knowledge base and a more valuable learning experience, I think it was owning that small business, recognizing that the owner gets paid last and, how the dollar flows through a business and how to deal with vendors and, new customer acquisition, all that stuff is invaluable. And they can't teach you that in business classes by reading, the Harvard Business Review or, having projects with other people. There's just no other way to simulate that other than doing it yourself.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right, you've got 1,100 dentists in the Dental Success Network, which is a great way to keep your ear to the ground in current events and what's going on. And so there's a lot of different moving parts right now. I mean, there's never a simple time in history, but it just seems like with supply chain issues coming off of COVID, inflation, labor shortages, all those things are happening at the same time. We were talking earlier just about the labor issue. So what are people in your network seeing and what are you doing about it?
Oh, man, that is the question of the hour for sure. 20 million people have not come back to the workforce after leaving during the pandemic. 20 million Americans have not come back to work, which is crazy. 40% of the workforce in the medical healthcare realm have not come back. So
why do you think it's so much higher in healthcare?
It's interesting. There's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of theories out there. My guess is that it's a stressful environment for one. The second thing is that I think that a lot of people that didn't want to be exposed to the virus or had people like young children or elderly parents didn't want to bring that home. So I think in the beginning, a lot of people just were putting their careers on pause. And then after you kind of lose momentum and you think about, hey, maybe I could get a job working from home and outside of this stressful environment, I think that a lot of people kind of pivoted and either are still not working, which is the case for a lot of people, or have pivoted to a different profession.
Yeah, which like brings up a different subject, because it's like, I get it when there's all this unemployment benefits going out and these, you know, these child credits and everything like that, but those things have all dried up. So now begs the question, like, what are people doing?
Yeah, isn't that the question of the hour? I mean, it's very, very interesting. How are people surviving? If there's 20 million people that are currently not back to the job force, I mean, maybe they've entered the gig economy. Maybe they're driving, Ubers. Maybe they are doing freelance work. Maybe they're teaching Excel spreadsheet classes. I don't know what they're doing, but
Trading cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, exactly. Living off the equity of their home because home values have gone up by so much. I'm not really quite sure, but I think when the dust settles, in X years, X months, I don't know when it is, I think we'll have a better kind of view looking back in retrospect about what was happening during this period of time. But I don't think that myself or anybody else has really figured it out.
Yeah. So then, it's compounded with inflation, and it's like less people want to work, and then which means you're going to have to pay more wages to drive them in. But then you combine that with the fact that like we have inflation, which that alone just the amount of like debt and money that we've created like through the Fed and the government. And so like what are some strategies that you've seen people implement successfully, or just what are they doing? What's happening?
Yeah, 38% of all money in circulation was printed over the last 2 years, which is crazy. Hard to believe, right? But yes, there has been a lot of adjustments that have had to be made in the general workforce. I will say that to my industry's credit, it's been fun to watch, and you did allude to the fact that I have kind of a unique perspective in that I have 1,100 practicing dentists within our group, our membership group called the Dental Success Network. So I speak to hundreds, if not thousands, of dentists every single year personally. And the sentiment is that although people are understaffed and working with skeleton crews, the last 6 to 18 months have been some of the best periods for many businesses, which is interesting, right? We're figuring out, and it's not just dentistry, we're figuring out how to do more with less people. And you see these signs everywhere, especially in California. I've seen it everywhere. These little A-frame signs. You walk into a restaurant that says, "Hey, the whole world is understaffed right now. Please be patient with us." Right? So you have these huge packed restaurants with half the number of people in the kitchen, half the servers, half the hostesses, no general manager, and they're crushing it. They're crushing it because people just understand that they're going to have to wait a little bit longer. They're a little bit nicer when they go into an environment like that. And so it's hospitality, it's all service-based industries, it's retail because of supply chain issues. It's, it's anything in manufacturing because of supply chain issues, including construction. So it's interesting that the economy as of right now, as we speak, is quite resilient, given the fact that there's so many fewer people in the workforce.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like I know that I personally I go like I look at like at Panera when I go drive through and get coffee or whatever, I'm there and I am like when they say staff shortages, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm more patient, you know what I mean? I'm more flexible. I'm less, I don't know want to say judgmental, but like I'm just more like my standards have lowered, and I'm just appreciative that people are there working, because now you realize like, oh yeah, a lot of these jobs, like in the hospitality industry, are not great jobs. It's not exactly where people want to be. So we got to, be appreciative when people are actually there working, because that'll probably just people being appreciative to them. I mean, before I feel like a lot of people took them for granted, and they badmouthed them or they gave them a hard time if they're a server. Like servers traditionally had really tough jobs, but like I think if we can, as in general, be more appreciative of the fact that they're there and they're working and they're putting in the effort, I think that could help some of this situation too.
Yeah, man. We talked a little bit last time about cryptocurrencies and stock values and stock valuations and stuff. I mean, we may be going through this like literally right now. And looking back, this might be not an evergreen, episode in the fact that in 3 months this could be totally different. But right now, it feels like stock prices are starting to come down. We may have been in a bubble for real estate and for overinflated stock valuations, et cetera. But what do you happen to think about, your area of expertise, which is commercial real estate? Do you feel like the values are hyperinflated? Do you feel like we're in a bubble?
So yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that it deserves a lot of discussion around it because first of all, like a lot of people are comparing 2022 to 2006 or 2008. And what I would say to that is it's very different. It's very hard to compare. And so like, if you think about it on a macroeconomic spectrum, we have booms and busts and we have, but traditionally we never really repeat the same mistakes within our lifetime, right? So that's why you'll see big resets like every 80, 100 years, because that's the typical lifespan of a human being. And so we just had a real estate related crash in 2008, right? Like I personally don't believe we're going to have another one. 1987 dot-com bubble, ironically, 100 years ago was a stock market created bubble, the Great Depression, Black Monday in 1929. That was like the Dow Jones had grown by 90% in a year or 2 years, or it was something like that. It was like, imagine like right now, if the S&P had doubled, right, in 1 year. That would be crazy. We're not seeing that type of growth. And then to bring it back to housing and real estate, there's three factors that are very different. Number one is the fact that banks are very strict on lending because of what happened. And so they're going through and they're making sure everybody who gets a home can afford it. They're making sure that they're checking your taxes. You know what I mean? Like there's none of these ninja loans, no income, no asset, no job loans going around. And there's making sure on top of that you have equity in the house. So not only do you have to prove that you can pay for this house every single month based on the income that you have, you also have to be putting down 10% equity. And what happened was when residential real estate prices increased by 10, 15, 20% in a single year, and the bank wasn't lending the money, they made up that difference in cash. So these are not people in 2006 who bought houses waiting for them to go up in value and then flip them. Like these are people who have a lot of skin in the game. And yeah, the third thing would just be most people right now want more space. They're genuinely a bigger demand because of COVID. They switched to having like as small space as possible to as big of a space as possible. So all three of those things are happening at the same time. People have equity, people have jobs. They're not going to let their housings go, and there's just more of an appetite for personal space for your personal home. So it's not like there's not a lot of speculation. There's not a lot of rental homes and stuff like that. And so I think all those are very, very significant factors into why housing prices are where they're at, and I don't see them coming down. That being said, recessions always come from, they call them black swans because you're looking somewhere else because we learn from our mistakes within our lifetime. And so I don't know where the next one is going to come from. I mean, it could be inflation related. It could be labor related, like any one of those things, but chances are like very few people were looking for a pandemic when that happened, right? I personally think that was the gatekeeper. I personally think that was the kind of reset that we're waiting for, that we were looking for. And I think that secularly, we're in a bull market. I mean, I know there's going to be corrections along the way, but like you said, companies are figuring out how to do this, even with less labor, less supply. So, I mean, eventually, if the problem could be that people don't go back to work and they can't afford anything, and then they're not, putting money back into the economy like that. Yeah, that could cause it. But I would imagine if they're not working, and we have a labor shortage, they don't necessarily need the money. So, to me, I think it's going to be rocky, but I still see that we're going to have a 10-year bullish cycle. And so not only the other thing that's different actually in 2008 is just the cost of building has gone up. So now wages have gone up like we're talking about. Nobody wants to do labor. So like general, like hard labor, like building things with their hands. I mean, some people do, but it's usually a job of last resort. And so you're having to pay them even more, like the handyman. I mean, I have a couple Airbnbs and, just getting guys to come out and do like odd jobs has gone through the roof, yet alone like the commercial real estate buildings that we do with the contractors that we had to hire. So that is also compounding by the fact that we have supply chain issues, which drive the price of everything up. So inflation, supply chain issues, which maybe those are one and the same, and then a labor shortage. So the cost of building real estate has just gone up a lot. And that's what makes the price as high as it is. And so, yeah, I don't see any of that changing anytime soon. That being said, I always dip one toe in the water. Like I'm never 100%. I don't ever have 100% conviction. I have strong enough conviction to take action, but not 100% conviction in anything because you just can't know the future. So I'm bullish on the future, but I know you're a little bit less bullish than me. So I'm curious to hear your feedback on why you think that might not be the case.
I'm optimistic, but I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. As somebody that did get stung in 2007, 2008, holding overpriced real estate, it's interesting, dude. Like literally last week, I sold my last piece of raw land that I picked up way back then, and it never caught up with the amount of money that I spent on it. I was underwater.
Was that in Arizona?
Yeah. Yep. Raw land.
Yeah. Arizona, Florida, they got hit some of the hardest. Nevada.
Yeah. I never short sold. I never defaulted. I just sold at a loss for all of them because I didn't want my credit to go to hell. And also it's just part of my integrity. I borrowed the money. I got myself into this mess. I got
That's
myself
great.
out of the mess. So I'm trying to be as, I guess, reasonable and conservative as possible while not letting my money just sitting in the bank account rotting, right? So I lost out on probably 4 different properties during this kind of upswing in real estate. 2 commercial properties by being outbid, and 2 residential properties that we were going to use as vacation rentals that I got outbid on. Was approved for the financing, had the down payment. And, the people just didn't want to wait. They were looking for all cash buyers that could close in 2 days.
Wow.
And these are people that I had won the bidding war. I even went above the asking price in all of the situations. So I maybe.
How long ago was this, if you don't mind me asking?
Probably within the last 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And
has the price gone up to? Well, actually, you said you paid more. You would have paid more than people who paid cash.
Yeah. I'm actually.
They just didn't want to wait.
I think everything happens for a reason, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't get into 2 of the commercial, the residential properties. The commercial properties would have been good for me, and I'm still looking now because I'm about to 1031 one of my commercial properties from a more remote location where I have identified a buyer. One of my tenants is going to buy from me. But I want to 1031 it to something that's a little bit closer to my home so I can manage it a little bit more effectively. But yeah, I like I said, I'm not necessarily a bear. I'm optimistic. So I think that things are going to go up. And I love some of the points that you kind of sketched out here. It makes me feel a little bit better about continuing to look for deals and staying in real estate. But I did go to cash in most of my brokerage accounts because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen to the stock market. And the volatility is just uncomfortable for me as somebody that does pick and buy individual stocks, not just index funds. So I did go to cash, took a little bit of a hit. And the hit is funny. You and I were talking off air. The hit isn't based on what my initial principal was. The hit was what it peaked at, the 52-week high that I'm comparing what I sold at. So I'm actually still up on the 12-month cycle, but that's in comparison to my initial investment, not to how high it got when things were out of control and
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you always base it on the all-time highs. It's like, oh well, you could have a 10% run up in one day. So the day before, you felt good, right, about the amount that was in your account. Now you got a 10% run up. You feel like that's yours. If you go down 10%, you feel worse than you did had it never gone up.
It's so true.
You feel like you're losing money.
True. Yeah. It's like, at 4 brokerage accounts, I'm like, I just lost $100,000. You actually didn't lose $100,000. You lost, some paper, or some decimals on a piece of paper. So,
you made less, but you didn't necessarily lose money.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how these things can play tricks on your head.
Yeah. So do you coming back to, you think the stock market is going to continue to go down, which I think it will be volatile as well, just because my opinion for that is that we've had such a bullish run for the last 2 years. It just is natural to have some volatility now. What do you see? What underlying reasons are you predicting volatility, or maybe even a deepened correction?
Yeah, well, inflation is probably the number one thing, right? Inflation, which is going to cause interest rates to go up, I believe. So the Fed, I don't think, is going to protect us from our stock prices going down. So I believe that the volatility has to do with inflation. It has to do with a lot of things you've talked about, supply chain issues and issues with the workforce. So that's the perfect trifecta for things to kind of go wonky on us. I think that once again, businesses have proven that they can do more with less, but I don't know how sustainable that is, particularly as interest rates go up and it gets harder to qualify for loans and people are less willing to borrow money with increased interest rates. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. It's like, so what happened with me personally was I started buying real estate, in 2011. I just got lucky that I timed the bottom, and then it kept going up, and I was, I bought a little bit more, invested a little bit more, and it just kept feeling so expensive. And then I kept waiting for a reset. And then eventually I just realized, like, wait a minute, like, even if it resets now and we have a 20% correction, I'm still overpaying than what I would have back when I thought it was expensive a year or two ago or 3 years ago or whatever.
Good point.
And I just realized, my mentality kind of shifted, and it's like, look, in general, where is the economy going? And if I can afford to buy real estate in a situation where my monthly expenses are paid for, right? So like whether it's a long-term tenant or a short-term rental or whatever it is, like as long as the monthly expenses are covered, and that means like a little bit extra than your expenses, like because you want a little bit of cash just for the unforeseen, right? But like I'm saying, like you don't really have to come out of pocket. It's self-sustaining. If you can buy those deals, then, and you have some equity in the building, right? So maybe 10% or 20%. Historically, it's very rare that we've seen like more than a 20, 30% correction in the real estate market. Mm-hmm. So let's just say you have 20%. Then the worst case scenario, you can sell, right? And you're not going to have to declare a bankruptcy on that bill. You're not going to have to foreclose on that building. And you know that your tenants are going to pay for it. So even if you don't make money, then you can afford some corrections. And then what's life look like for you in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? A lot of like the really, really wealthy people that I know that seem really, really smart did absolutely nothing but buy and hold. And it's like the same is true, they said, with Charles Schwab. The most successful people who saw the most growth in their accounts were people who forgot their passwords.
Oh, that's awesome.
Who couldn't log, they just forgot and they couldn't log in and they did nothing and they just let it sit there and grow. And so that's kind of like my mentality. It's like, okay, are the fundamentals here? Meaning, can I make the payments every month based on the cash flow? Mm-hmm. And do I have enough equity? Like if we were to have some sort of correction that I could sell if I had to, and those two things are yes, then it's like, I'm not smart enough to time the market. I know that in general, things get better and better. If they don't, and we're not going to be worried about real estate. We're worried about guns and water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's kind of like my mentality when I look through it. I'm curious if you have a similar one or not.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of truth to what you said there. I am curious as far as like, do you have a long-term strategy with real estate? Do you want to hold on to real estate from now until forever and then maybe pass it on to your heirs? Or are you seeing like a time? Is there a trigger when you would say, all right, I'm going to unload with a couple of different properties here because they're either paid off or the cash flow isn't what I want it to be, or I feel like this cash would perform better somewhere else? Or are you set on holding on to the real estate long-term?
Yeah, I prefer to hold. That's my preference for sure. Now that being said, like I'm always situational. I mean, there's plenty of situations like where it makes sense to sell. You know what I mean? Like if you can, I think what the determining factor is what are you looking at right now, right? So my ideal situation is buy a property, do some sort of value add. Maybe you put an accredited tenant in there and you sign a long-term lease with them or something, and then you refinance to get most of your money back. And then you take that money, so you still hold it, but you've still gotten a majority of your principal back. Mm-hmm. Now the payments are being met, and then you take that money and you go do another deal. Like that's my preference. And then I think that right now, from my analysis, doing that every 10 years, because the building increases in value and equity. And then in 10 years time, you've got a significant amount of equity in there, and then you can refinance again. Now, of course, like you want to make sure your payments are getting met by the leases or the business or whatever it is. But that's sort of my preference. Now, all that being said, like if there was a really great opportunity and I had to sell, to get rid of the debt load, or your refinancing isn't going to pull out enough money to close on the deal. Like in those situations where I'm presented with a really, really great opportunity and I happen to be able to sell at the same time, like that's when I would sell. But for the most part, like I'm not really getting in it to flip it personally. It's mostly holding.
And is cash flow more important to you, or overall equity and net worth growth?
Yeah, overall equity and net worth growth. I mean, right now, it is really hard to get cash flow, like we talked about with all the different things that are going on. Now you can do it, obviously. There's many different ways to structure it. But it's always there's kind of a trade-off of time and money, right? And it's like, so for example, right, we just closed on an Airbnb. It's gonna be like a wedding venue type situation. And
Cool.
that is like, yeah, so that is just, there's a lot of stuff that has to go and set up. And so I got this, like, am I gonna kind of act as like the person who facilitates all the different things, as like not like the general contractor, but like, am I going to hire GCs? Am I going to hire designers? Am I going to hire these things? Or like how much am I going to do myself? Or am I going to like outsource the hiring part of it? Right. And it's like, you can do as little as you want, but that's going to cost you more and more and more money. So I'm balancing how much time do I want to spend myself. It's a combination of like saving money for like a really professional, because you can pay as much money as you want for a professional to come in and just do everything, all the way from like the artwork to the foundation to like setting up the booking and managing all that kind of stuff. Or you can do everything in between too. So it's finding that right balance. But to where I was still in that situation, I'm doing enough to where I'm still trying to make really good cash flow on that. Like, I think that property will cash flow very, very well for us once it's all set up. But it's also, I do know that it's going to be work and headache and that sort of thing. And if we're buying a commercial building for for DSO or something like that, then it's like any sort of, tenant that's a business, any sort of commercial real estate, their business relies on that stuff within the building operating well. So they're going to be taking care of a lot of that headache. And so the plan for that is to be much less headache, much less hands-on, much less work, but it's going to be less cash flow. So it's a trade-off.
Do you feel as though long-term rentals for residential real estate are safer than vacation rentals in the Airbnb space?
So that's a tough one. I'm personally not interested in long-term residential rentals at all. Like I've been doing Airbnbs for a while, and
tenants
it's been
and toilets.
Nicely. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you got to have people on staff, but like the maids, they should go through each time, and they're taking really good inventory of everything, and it actually keeps your houses in better shape, even though it gets more use. So that, like, you might have to make a call, to somebody to fix something that's broken or whatever. But in general, it's like twice the work, twice the money is how I look at it. And so for me, like, I'm more interested in the short-term rentals, and if I get enough of them, maybe I'll have an in-house full-time guy to kind of do what I'm doing. But right now I'm still kind of learning the process and learning the business. And so, yeah, that's my personal preference is Airbnbs over. But, it's harder. You got to make sure they're in the right spot. It takes a lot. You're furnishing it. I mean, it's hard to get financing for the bank to furnish things. So that's like, it is more expensive out of pocket. Like, you can get the bank's money to do a lot of the down payment of the house, a significant point of the house, but it's harder to get that money to do everything you want to do within it. So it is a little bit more.
You got to stage it. You got to stage it. It's got to be durable stuff inside, even though it's very stylish as well. But I mean, the potential upside to having a really good Airbnb that's popular and has, what is it? What's the occupancy rate that you're shooting for?
We're, I'm in Orlando. We're getting about 75% occupancy, which is pretty good. Surprisingly, because we're in Florida during COVID, we were like almost 90% booked, like the whole year, 95% booked.
Like
everybody's coming
year?
to Florida. Yeah, everybody's coming to Florida. So even now, so now it's really good. So I'm looking for other markets like that. But, my strategy moving forward with that is let's find a market that's doing really, really well. Like, okay, take Charleston, South Carolina. That's doing phenomenal, that Hilton Head area, but it's very, very, very expensive. So what's a secondary market that could have some potential growth? It would be Myrtle Beach, right? So Myrtle Beach hit my radar, and that's something that we're looking into as well. Where you said you got a vacation rental. Where are yours?
Oh no, I don't own a vacation rental. I was trying to. Yeah. Right now I'm in a 120-year-old Victorian building. That's where my business headquarters is. And this would be an incredible Airbnb. So we're looking for actually the reason that I was looking for commercial space in this downtown Prescott area was because I wanted to turn this into an Airbnb. It's perfect. In fact, we turned the bottom basement into a fully functioning apartment. But
oh, wow.
I make my lunches down there and chill out, to get away from my team halfway, half the time. So I haven't made the jump to turning that into an Airbnb yet, but this would be an ideal one where I'm standing right now, but I can't find any other commercial property to purchase, and I don't want to lease something because then it would be kind of that would be kind of nonsensical to go lease something so I could rent out the building that I own.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, and with Airbnbs, you can definitely do those older homes because they tell a story, right? And you
mhm.
can you can literally tell a story. Like you can put up stories, like frame them out, like write them, hang them up on the wall, tell stories about the rooms and how the house was built and who lived here and who did whatever. And so then people are like, they're not so upset that the floor is a little warpy or like that
Yeah,
the faucet's a little bit slower because like they're living in a story, like they're staying in a story. So I think that'd be a great idea.
yeah, yeah.
And then, yeah, I want to talk too before we wrap up, just like a little bit about back to the macro economy, back to the cryptocurrencies. You know, I've been studying this a lot, and it's hard. Like originally, the reason I bought crypto was just as a hedge against like an insurance policy, right? In case the Fed keeps printing money, which they have been. But what's
Mhm.
ironic is that it's supposed to be an anti-correlated asset, like Bitcoin is supposed to be anti-correlated, non-correlated to the dollar, to the market, to the real estate, nothing, right? But it's been like extremely correlated lately,
Mhm.
and so it seems like it might not be as much of a insurance policy as I originally thought. And so I'm just curious, like, why do you think that's happening, and what are you doing in your crypto portfolio?
Yeah, isn't that so funny? Isn't it contrary to what the reason that we all kind of got into crypto in the first place? I mean, it definitely has been a canary in the coal mine. It's like it drops, and then X number of days or weeks later, the stock market follows. It goes up, you get
Yeah,
a spike, you get a correction, you get the dead cat bounce, it bounces up, and then 2 weeks later the stock market follows. So it's been very correlative. Bitcoin in particular, not necessarily the whole crypto market, but Bitcoin in particular,
yeah.
very, very interesting. And I don't really know why. I don't know why, man. And I am glad that I bought Bitcoin when I did. Of course, I'm just like everybody else, particularly on this day. I wish that I would have bought more when I had the opportunity, and I wish I would have bought more aggressively into the dip. But who knows? Who knows with the volatility of it? But I am very much a creature of the emotion of the marketplace, just like everybody else is. I can't say that I'm super disciplined investor because when I see, four brokerage accounts go down by X%, I am not super eager to go out and dump a bunch of money into my favorite stocks or into Bitcoin for that matter. You just kind of want to lick your wounds and hide in a corner for a while and wait for the storm to pass and hope that everything gets up to 50% of where it was at the 52-week high. So I can't tell you why it's happening, why Bitcoin is so correlative to the general stock market, but I definitely see what you're talking about, and it's kind of contrary to common sense.
Are you holding all your positions in crypto?
Yeah, and I'm adding a little bit to crypto, a little bit to Bitcoin, and more aggressively to Ether.
Yeah, I like Ethereum too. That's my second favorite.
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, I'm not smart enough to predict the market, so I put it in there and I hold it and I try to never have to pull it out. Like that's I mean, for a long, long time at least. But I'm trying to think on 5, 10-year horizons, 20-year horizons. It's just hard when you see it like way down or way up. You're like thinking it's always tempting to be like, I should cash out right now, or I should do this. But so far,
Do you pick
it's just been a
individual
long-term.
stocks, or do you do index funds, or do you pick a sector and invest in that, or how do you do stocks?
There's actually a guy named K Kim that I follow. I do
Hmm.
like his program, and he does like a little analysis every single day, and so he's got a cool little program that kind of just sends out his stocks and his recommendations. And so there's been, and don't get me wrong, within that there's been a lot of stocks that we've sold, or at least sold a third or half of along the way, and bought back in. But it's just the strategy is like you try and buy something when it's really beaten up and really undervalued, and it's dropped way, way down. Everybody's saying like sell stuff like Peloton recently we didn't buy it, but that would be a good example. Like it was trading at 25, it used to be at 150. So
Yeah,
what we would do in that situation is buy it because it's really beat up. Maybe it goes down even further, whatever, but maybe 6 months, 9 months, it's up way, way up again. Then you take a little bit from the top that's doing really well and look for another stock that's like really beat up, really undervalued. So like you might put that in Netflix, right? Because Netflix has gotten really beat up. So buy that, wait for that to come back up a little bit, and then you might hold some, but take a little bit more from the top, and then look for another. So that's kind of like the process. It's almost like similar to that buy, hold, refinance, invest type thing, but like just slightly different, slightly quicker.
it's
So that's kind
interesting
of
though,
our
man. It's like you watch some of these earnings reports and these webinars that they're obligated to do for their shareholders, and it's like, holy cow, everything looks great for Tesla. The earnings report was amazing. It outperformed by X factor, and then the stock goes down the next day. Same thing with Apple, and same thing with some of these other juggernauts.
It's
like
crazy.
It defies logic in so many different ways that it's impossible to predict based on, normal rationale what's going to happen.
Yeah, I really think the charts do tell you a lot. You know what I mean? Like following overbought and oversold signals. I think they tell you a lot more than like just looking, because the underlying data, I think over time wins. Like, the earnings reports and that sort of things, but it's really moved. It's so emotional now. It's really moved. Like the companies are just trading at crazy multiples, and like, yeah, Tesla, Peloton, Netflix, Zoom, all those types of companies that really took off and then got clamored. Like,
you just sound like you listed off the whole ARK investment portfolio. Kathy Wood.
Oh yeah, I still like Kathy Woods a lot. I listen to all her webinars. I think she's got a great perspective. I think long term.
But all of her stocks are beat up right now. Her whole index
beat up last year, really bad.
Yeah. It's been 2021 was tough.
Yeah. So and then finally, just like I know you got a lot of different friends in a lot of different industries. What are they doing to combat like the labor shortage? Is there anything that you've seen that they're doing that's super creative? How are they? Gyms, restaurants, dentists, you name it. Like they're all kind of dealing with the same problems right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of very forward-thinking friends. I have a friend here who owns 4 restaurants in our local town, and he was actually on CNN and Fox News. They featured him national news because he came up with this program where he's actually doing tuition repayment for servers. And so that was so forward-thinking that they were like, oh, wow, somebody that cooks for you for $12 an hour is going to have their tuition paid? And he's like, yeah. That's basically what I'm going to do. Wow. Super, super smart guy. And he's contacting, the admissions offices and the tuition offices and he's getting breaks on tuition for these guys. And he, he penciled it out that it actually makes sense to pay for tuition if they stay for 3 years. Right. I have another friend that lives in Vail Valley, Colorado.
So do they have to do how do they physically get their tuition paid for? So they have to be there for a certain number of years before he offers that. And then obviously, they have to, if he pays for their tuition August 1st, do they have to stay there till December 1st when that's over? You know what I mean? What do you know technically what that looks like?
Yeah, that's kind of what they're obligated to do. In my profession, what that looks like typically is somebody would sign a contract for say 36 months, right? They say, and the way what we would do is
pay it back if they leave, or is it an honor system?
That's exactly right. So you say I'm basically giving you kind of a loan, and you're gonna pay this loan back every single paycheck. So you're gonna kind of take away a little bit as a bonus from say $1,000, the $1,000 in tuition assistance. So they would pay that out over 36 months, and if they leave at any time before that, they'd be obligated to pay back the balance.
Okay.
So that's the way that it works in my profession. I don't know exactly how my friend is doing it as the restaurant owner, but I have other friends that are in more remote areas or resort towns where they're having a really hard time with the workforce, and they literally have 2 or 3 houses, and they're allowing people to stay there rent free if they will work for a season. Say they'll work during the ski season. They'll work for 7 months. They can stay in this rental house basically for free. And that makes perfect sense to me because the business is paying down the mortgage, the principal on that property. Whereas other times, I have, a $20,000 signing bonus for one of my doctors to come move out here to a more remote area. That makes less sense because that money is gone forever versus, saying I'll pay $20,000 in your living expenses because I own the house, and you're actually paying down the principal. So I'm not as smart as a lot of my friends, and I haven't done that yet, but those are just some of the things that I've seen people do.
It's smart. Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't see this problem really getting any better anytime soon. So I think people are, especially business owners, are just going to have to continually get more creative to squeeze more out of their margins and automation and using the labor force that they have.
Totally agree. It's a very interesting time, isn't it, Austin? I mean, every day I get up, I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And I'm a student of it. And I love seeing things that have never happened in the history of economics before. But it also does, build up the stomach acid a little bit when you're trying to figure out how you're going to run several businesses without any people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. This is it's been great. It was awesome talking about the economy, talking about what you guys are doing, hearing from the boots on the ground, and yeah, just overarching pictures and theses. So if anybody wants to like learn more about what you're doing, either personally or through the Dental Success Network or anything like that, what's a good resource for them to do so?
Sure, you can find me on all the socials. If you go to Instagram, I'm at Dr. Mark Costes. That's MarkCostes. You can find my podcast, Dentalpreneur Podcast, on anywhere there are podcasts. We have the largest dental podcast. And it is basically a general business podcast. I've had a lot of really, really cool non-dental guests. I had, Robert O'Neill, the guy who shot Osama bin Laden. I've had Ryan Holiday. I've had Robert Kiyosaki.
Cool.
I've had David Sinclair, MD, PhD, the guy, the leading researcher in longevity. So we have lots of really interesting people that are non-dental and more personal development-y and economics based. So come on over and check that out.
I love that. Yeah. It's super important.
I totally agree. No matter what business you're in, it's important to have a well-rounded.
Yeah, it starts with your mindset,
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, hey, thanks so much for your time today. Very insightful. I love what you guys are doing and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Austin. Great to be here, buddy.